Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Hi, welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I'm here with Cookie Griffith, and we are going to dive on a few different topics. We've got brain cancer that we're going to talk about. We've got an assault we're going to talk about. We've got her living in Alaska, which I really want to know about. And we have all kinds of extra little goodies in here that we're going to discuss because, as you know, grief is fluid. Grief has no beginning and no end. And a lot of times it compounds itself on top of each other. And it looks like we're just trying to dig our asses out of a hole that just keeps piling on more dirt. But eventually we get there. So welcome, Cookie. Thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing your story. And I know it can be a lot. And I know it can be intimidating to try to tell your story, especially for the first time. So just give me a brief overview of what you put in the questionnaire that I sent out.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on, Faith. This is my first podcast interview, so super fun. I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited at the same time. I was introduced to you from a friend. Chelsea Kenyon actually tagged me in your post about, doing a podcast interview. So that was pretty cool that we connected through a mutual friend.
Yeah.
And the things I put in my intake was a lot. Like you said, it was a lot.
It was a lot.
I basically started at the beginning of January of 2023, where my house had flooded. My husband was away for 2 months. He literally had just left and then the house flooded. So the kitchen had to be renovated immediately. It was, some sewer backup. So that wasn't good. We had to leave. Yeah. I have 3 children, so it wasn't a fun time at all.
No. Especially imagine because the kitchen is generally in our house is the universal hub. Where everything happens. And how old are your children?
I have twin 11-year-olds and a 6-year-old son.
Okay. Yeah, that would be very traumatic for them too, leaving the house that they know.
Exactly. So yes, same for me. We're very foodie people. I actually run a food trailer, so cool. I'm like another level of foodie.
Right?
Yeah. I thought it was the only challenge I was going to have to deal with right off the bat, hey, 2023, what's up? Oh, here's a flood immediately. So right. Why is it happening? You start to question everything in life, when things get difficult. But that was just the very beginning of all the trauma that came. After that, we had to rip up the entire kitchen, cabinets, sink, everything. We have a wood stove, so my kids who are homebodies convinced me to come back home eventually. And I was cooking on the wood stove. So
oh no.
It was bittersweet. I was really grateful to have the wood stove. But also I was like, man, this is really difficult. Like I wasn't prepared for this. I was not wanting to do this, but the things
Wait a second. You said you're cooking on the wood stove?
Yes.
Not heating.
No, cooking on my wood stove.
Oh wow, that's a whole nother level. So this is
exactly.
Like camping on a wood stove perpetually.
Oh yeah, we did that for weeks because my kitchen was tore apart.
Sure.
Yeah. So we were able to use one of the sinks in the bathroom. I had sanitized it all and made it so it was my dishwashing sink because the bathroom was okay, but the kitchen was completely empty. It was down to the concrete. We are on a concrete slab, so it was like bare. So we were battling with that. And on, I think it was the 30th of January. So this is weeks of, ripping it apart and finding supplies. When you live at the end of the road and you're not in a city, we live roughly 5 hours away from a city that has a Home
Right.
Depot.
Yes.
So it's hard to get supplies here. You got to ask people for help, or you got to pay the shipping, which can be astronomical at
Yes.
that point. I had to battle my insurance company to make sure they were going to cover the claim. And, insurance, they love you to pay them, but they don't love to pay you back.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
there was a lot going on there. But in the middle of the renovations, I got a phone call from my husband who was away at training. He was like 6 hours away from us for 2 whole months. And he told me that his brother was found dead. Unexpectedly, he had died in an accident. And it was like the biggest shock ever to be
Oh, wow.
experiencing the flood and, not having a normal working home. And then for my husband, who's not even here, to have lost his brother, it was just so much to take on. Like, I didn't know how to be there for him when I wasn't physically there. So
Right. When
I
you
just
say he
told,
was away for training, is he in the military?
no, he is an apprentice for a telecom company
Okay.
here. And so I think it's once a year he has to go away for about 2 months to do this telecom training,
Right.
which, it's worth it for the 5-year
Sure.
plan we have, but
Sure.
not worth it when you're dealing with so much with 3 kids and a dog and a broken down home.
Right. No, I completely understand that. I was just super curious.
Sure. Um, Immediately, from all the experiences I've had, there's not any words that you can say to someone or that you can hear for yourself if you're on the opposite end that are going to change anything, that are going to make you feel comfort. So I just said, whatever you need, you know,
Right.
if you need to leave training and come home, let's do that. If you need to go be with your family, your immediate family, go do that. Like,
Right.
I support whatever decision you make, because there's nothing that I can choose that's going to be the right answer. And
Right.
I think he appreciated that. I really stayed in that lane the whole entire time when I was trying to
Mhm.
help him through, the initial shock of it.
How old was his brother?
He was only like 32, I believe. Very young.
Young, so young.
Yeah. So really sucks.
Yeah.
He comes from, there were 7 of them. Now there's 6. Pretty tight knit family, and to lose a sibling at a young age I can't even imagine that, you know?
Right.
Um, so after that, my husband, I don't know, he must have went into like a weird mode, because then he started to like support me more. And I was like, wait a minute, like, I feel like I'm the one that needs to be there for you, and here you are
Right.
trying to help me through all these things. We by phone, by video chat, redid the whole entire kitchen like
Oh,
twice, on paper, like sketches, and he had me
yeah.
measuring. And then he like made a computer generated like little thing that I could give to my contractor, like, this is how I want it to be put together. And
Right.
then I was told that the shipment for all the supplies were coming in like
Okay.
the next day. And so he quickly found a couple of his friends to help me move all the supplies in, because it's like countertops and
Right.
cabinets,
It's a lot.
flooring. It's so heavy. And
Yeah.
I did not want to do any of that. Not that I physically could have done it by myself. So I was so grateful that he was like, no, my friends will come, they'll help you, it's going to be okay. And they'll get it in there, and then our contractor can do the rest. I'm like, okay, great. So he sends these friends, they move all the stuff in, and I, to thank them, was like, let's have a couple of shots. I had a bottle of vodka. Let's have some drinks. Everything was great. We were talking about how I felt more comfortable, like I felt closer to my husband, that his friends were there.
Mhm.
Because my husband wasn't physically there, but these are his
Right.
friends that, he hung
Right.
out with. And so we were having a great time. And then at one point, one of his friends completely, it was like, if I could put any word on it, I would say he became possessed. I've never seen this guy like this before. I've known
Hmm.
him for like 12 plus years. And I was
Really?
a bartender at the bar he used to frequent. Like, I've never seen this guy ever be this way. So for me, I was like, there's got to be something else that happened. He had disappeared for like 10 minutes. And then when he came back, he didn't know who I was.
That's odd.
It was very odd. He made this sound that I've never heard come out of a human. Like it was like a movie scene, like replaying it in my head right now, hearing, because I can, like you think back to like the sound that you heard,
Right.
hearing his voice. It wasn't his voice. It was literally like he had become possessed. He picked me up by my hoodie like this, and by the neck of my hoodie, and was holding me off the ground and said, "Who are you?" like multiple times. And I was so scared. My kids were in the house. I was trying to get them not to leave because I wanted them to get a safe ride because we had some drinks, and like, it's not worth it. Don't drive. My husband just lost his brother. Like, let's not, lose anyone else here.
Right.
I eventually was able to have him release me, but
were there other friends there still, or was it just you and him?
There was another friend there. He saw the whole thing happen, but when the guy put me down, his other friend got up and ran. He went and got his truck and like parked it all weird in my driveway, and like a getaway vehicle. It was the weirdest. Like, I can't, just saying it out loud doesn't even feel real. It's bizarre, like what had happened that night. I was traumatized. My kids heard me.
I'm traumatized listening. I mean, for real.
It is awful. It is awful. It's way easier now to talk about it since time has passed, court has been, taken care of and all those things. And I've managed to somehow work through the traumatic experience. I don't even know really how, but I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that more.
Right.
So after that incident, or after that happened, my kids had heard me, I guess. And they called my husband, or were messaging my husband, and my husband called me on video chat, and I answered the phone, and I was hysterical. My hair was all rustled, and he was trying to get the other guy just to get out of there because the one that assaulted me had ran. We don't know where he went. He was gone.
But the other friend went and parked the vehicle all weird in your driveway, right?
Yeah. Just an almost
like they were together in on it.
Yes, like it, or it like it was familiar, like the friend that didn't
They've done this before.
Yeah, that's exactly how it felt. Like he knew this guy had this kind of temper or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, issue. And he's like, I know what to do. We got to get him out of here, and it was weird. It was really weird. I guess my husband had told one of our friends that lives behind us to call the cops. The cops eventually showed up, and they were interviewing me, and they're telling me, please, just need you to tell us the story. And I told them I didn't want to. And they're like, why not? And I was like, I'm just really afraid. Like, if you could have heard what that guy sounded like, you wouldn't want to tell anyone about it either,
Right.
I was really afraid that he would retaliate if he got in trouble. And I just didn't want anything to do with it. I kind of just wanted to do, the typical sweep it under the rug and let's not talk about it at all. But it was too far gone. It was too late. My neighbor had came over, and she's like a counselor at the elementary school. And she ended up calling one of my brothers to come pick us up because she's like, you're not staying here tonight.
Yeah, that'd be scary to stay there. In case they came back, or you had no idea what they were going to do.
Exactly. So a few days, had gone by. The cops had talked to me a couple different times as part of their investigation. We went and stayed at my brother's that night that it happened, and it was awful. My husband wasn't home. His brother had just passed away, and now I'm feeling like I created problems, by having some drinks with friends. But I didn't see any problem with it because we've done these things in the past before, and no one's ever gotten hurt, So that was compounded on top of my husband losing his brother. I didn't really want to get comforted from my husband because he was dealing with his grief from his brother passing. It was, I felt like it's too much. And he's like, I don't care. You need to tell the cops. You need to, make sure that you press charges. I actually didn't even press charges right away. I waited. And then the cops, reminded me when they came to talk to me the second day, like, hey, at any time you can press charges. That's okay. We can't tell you to, but we just want you to know it's okay to.
Available. Yeah.
My friends told me you need to, and I said, I really am afraid to press charges. I don't want to because I'm scared what he's going to do, and
Right.
they had assured me that he was under a circumstance or he wasn't allowed to come near me. He wasn't allowed to, get in trouble because he ended up getting arrested that night.
Okay.
He woke up the next morning and the cops told me that the first thing he said to them that he didn't remember anything. And so not only did I get assaulted by this person, but now they're claiming they didn't remember it. So it's like, great. Well, now
like a slap in the face almost.
Yeah, it was. That's how it felt. Like, are you serious? Like, is that real? Like, did you really not remember what you did? And so then I'm like, how is he going to take responsibility for something he doesn't remember doing? Like, how does that work?
Is this just a game, or is this just a cover for him to get out of trouble or something like that?
Exactly. And as time went on and, things were coming together for the court case, I was like, man, this is just seemingly like they knew exactly what to do, what to say, how to, where to do this and that. Just all felt like a setup, but I had to remove myself from that thinking. I was like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm still pressing charges because justice needs to be served here. It has to be.
And you could potentially help save another woman from going through something like this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I kept quiet for a while about it. I only had told our very, very close friends, which was only like maybe 3. My husband knew and, my brothers knew, but not really anyone else knew. And I felt awful because, like you said, I could maybe help other people. And I felt my silence was going to take that away. But I really wanted to be careful because he still had to be sentenced. So I didn't want anything to affect that on my side.
Right.
So we waited for a while, to get to that point. But in the meantime, a week passes by. So I had been struggling with alcohol the majority of my life. I've quit drinking multiple times, never really sticks. But that next day I was like, I need to take a break because what if we weren't drinking? Would that have still happened? A lot of times people don't want to take responsibility for the fact that they were drinking and things happened. But I really, really had to get honest. Like,
of course, we all play some part in everything, whether it's a major part or a minor part. We all, it's sad, but I mean, it is.
Exactly. So a week later, I got a phone call from the long-term care here where my mom had been living for a while. She had been diagnosed with brain cancer roughly 3 years prior.
Oh, okay.
And we had eventually gotten her into the long-term care facility here so she could have the care that she needed because we didn't know how to take care of her at home when her health was declining, and she wasn't remembering things. And then eventually she couldn't see, she couldn't talk. So it's like we needed professionals at that point.
Right.
But the phone call I received was on the 7th of February. So hello, January. Hello, February.
Yes, we're going to come ringing in with the bang.
Oh my gosh, it was too much. And the lady told me, we think she's actively going. Her breathing is rapid. It's just all the typical signs of what it's like when they're about to go. And I was like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? I've got all this trauma from being assaulted. I can't even think straight. So I reached out to one of my friends and she came out at like 4:30 in the morning. We just sat in my driveway and talked the whole time. Like,
oh, that's good.
All of it, and yeah, it was. One of my brothers was out of town and our pact was that we would work together and make the decisions, majority vote. What do we do?
That's
so good. I waited to hear back from my brother who was out of town. He's like, well, I'm not going to make it back until this hour because I'm out of town, and I'm like, yeah, that's why we're just going to wait. We don't know what to do yet, but there was decisions to be made. Do we treat? Do we not treat? And my mom didn't want to be a vegetable. She didn't even want to be what she was when she was living in long-term care, So as difficult as the decisions were to make, we made them.
Yeah.
Knowing what she would have wanted. 11 days later, she passed away, though. It was,
Oh, wow.
it was awful. Yeah. So it was less than a month, where we experienced 2 deaths in our immediate families. My husband's not here. I'm not there. How do we do this? And I was having a lot of anger. That's typically what I respond with, is anger when I'm hurt in any way. And I just said, I don't understand how, society sets us up for marriage, or, finding a partner and being with that partner so you don't have to do life alone. And here we are doing life alone.
Right.
with death, in our immediate families. It was awful. I didn't know how I was going to make it through, but it kind of reinforced my decision to stop drinking, because I knew that that was my coping mechanism. And I wasn't going to cope with my mom's death well if I continued to drink, on top of all the other trauma, on top of my husband's brother. Yeah. So I just really used my trauma at the time to keep me from drinking. The smell of alcohol triggered, the thoughts of that, what happened that night when I was assaulted. So
oh my gosh,
it was crazy. And I knew, I was aware enough to know that the trauma eventually will become more dull, and you're not going to be able to use that as your reason anymore, but I just kept looking for reasons to stay away from alcohol, or to not to drink it. I didn't want to have to be a recluse, because there's some people that can't control themselves and they have to just not be around it at all. But I wanted to be a person that could be with all of my people still and be okay with it.
Right.
So I just practiced, I found reasons not to drink. And man, every day I find another reason. I don't want to look like that or like
that. Who cares what the reasons are? You're using them, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is, first of all, I want to say you're amazing. And I know a lot of times people don't want to hear that, because they're like, well, I just did what I had to do.
Yeah.
But not everybody does what they have to do. First of all, not everybody does that. Some people, they break down and they hide. They get stuck in one of the stages of grief, and they just never move forward past that. They just get stuck in the anger, and then they start using those band-aids to make themselves feel better, because they don't want to feel, they don't want to process, and they don't want to go through the motions of grief, because it's hard. It's hard work. It's inner work. It's not outer work.
Yeah.
And so first of all, I just want to say congratulations on even having the coherency to have those thoughts that maybe I shouldn't drink. This is a good reason to not drink. This is, oh my gosh, this on top of this, on top of this, on top of this. Amazing.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. I find that amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was definitely not my typical response to things. However,
no.
However, I know myself very well. I think that's, one of my superpowers, is knowing myself so well that I knew what was going to happen if I kept drinking, with all that grief and trauma just coming at me constantly,
Right.
That all happened in a matter of 2 weeks, or a little over 2 weeks. That's a lot. Most people don't experience those things in an entire lifetime,
Right.
So it's crazy to think that I made a different decision this time, but I just knew, I had to heal it, because anytime I would stop drinking, all the things I never dealt with would get back in line. It's oh, here's the line forming again, and now these are all the things you never dealt with.
They're pulling their tickets, I'm next, I'm next. And now you're like, no, bitch, you in last in line now, because I done dealt with you.
Exactly. I had to only deal with what was right in front of me,
That's, it's amazing.
I couldn't do anything else. And still, the house wasn't put back together during this whole time.
No.
So it was.
And your husband.
Yeah, and he's still gone. He was still gone at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. Because he left beginning of January, so he wouldn't be coming back for 2 whole months after that, you know.
So beginning of March.
Yeah, it was a lot. I was like, I don't know how we're gonna make it. That was my biggest fear. Like, I don't think we're gonna make it through this. I said that to him a bunch of times, and he said, we're gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. We're dealing with it, you know.
Yeah.
We're fighting less. I was like, well, maybe you should go away more often.
Right? Maybe you should. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we made a lot of jokes because, you know, we didn't know what else to do.
Well, I think that, okay, so my theory on grief and death and loss and all those things is it'll either drive you apart or it'll drive you together. And or you'll just be like this weird but it still drives you apart, even if you're like just together but not talking, it still drives you apart. So it's nice to see that it drove you guys together, even if it was in this weird way that you're making jokes with each other about like, I don't know what to do. Maybe we won't make it, you know, whatever. Maybe this will tear us apart, you know, but at least you're honest and upfront, which is, it's exceptional to find when you're in the midst of grief, because you try to find all these excuses to not deal with it, or excuses as to why you say something or do something or act a different way or whatever. And it's nice to see that you're like, no, this is mine. I'm bearing it. I will figure out how to deal with it and I will move forward.
Exactly.
Which is, I mean, it's commendable because let me tell you, not everyone does that.
Yeah,
not everyone does that.
Yeah. And, you know, part of me almost felt like I was outside of my body, looking at myself like from a totally different perspective and wondering who I was, because I don't know the me without the alcohol. You know, I've used it for so long. I didn't know how to be without it, but it just is so much easier. You know, there was so much drama involved with drinking all the time. We were always worried about how many beers do we have for the night? We're gonna need, oh shoot, you left town already? Can you turn around? Can you go get us some more beer? You know, it's like always
Right.
circus. And to not have to worry about that anymore. Me and my husband talk about that all the time. Like, man, it's so great to not like have to worry about, did you get
So
beer?
did
I
he
thought you
quit
got beer.
drinking too?
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about that part. So
Yeah.
6 days after I decided to stop drinking, he just decided he wasn't going to drink that one day, and then he just kept it going. And so I did not prompt him. I wanted to make sure that if he was going to, you know, be without alcohol as well, that it was on his own terms. I was not going to be a part of that. I just told him I needed to be without alcohol, and that was absolutely what was necessary for me to get through everything we were dealing with. And he's, you know, he didn't really say much about that except for, you know, that it's a good thing.
Right.
I'm not really the kind that needs the words of affirmation. My love language is do things for me. Acts of service.
I like that. That is awesome.
So yeah, my husband is only 6 days behind me. I think it's been almost 6 months now. I think on my thing it was like five months. So a little under 6 months now for both of us. And it's changed everything, but it's also very challenging. Because, you know, you don't get to numb it out anymore. You don't get to, it's like if you have a problem and then you start drinking, it's like you loosen up and things don't seem as hard. And so you don't deal with the issue at hand.
Right.
Now we're like, oh no. Well, I can't go get a beer now to like calm down, you know?
Like, oh no, damn it, it's here and
Yeah.
I have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a very different life because for majority of our relationship, we're going to be married 7 years this September. And the majority of that time has been with alcohol, both of us.
Sure.
So it's a totally new world. We're learning, you know, how to be in it without, you know, we used to think that fun was let's go have beers after work, you know?
Right.
Now
You
it's
have
like,
to find new things to do.
yeah. So we don't do those things anymore, you know. And well, one time I did go with my brother and he had drinks, but me and my son had root beer, you know. It was like I could still hang out, but we don't get the invites anymore. It's like,
Right? They're like, well, no, they're boring now.
yeah. But, I still feel like I'm still super fun to be around because I feel like I'm just the same person, but maybe a little more amped up on alcohol.
Right.
But it's been really
Yes.
hard to deal with all the grief for sure.
So what steps are you taking to help yourself with the grief and to help your family through the grief? Because you have children too, 3 of them, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So initially, I was invited by one of our friends to do Zoom meetings that were for AA.
Mhm.
And I did that for a while in the beginning because I honestly didn't know how I was going to let go of alcohol. Every single time I went on a meeting and I got, it was my turn to speak. They don't make you speak, but I wanted to speak because I went there to speak.
Yeah.
I would just cry, and I don't know if that was part of the grief or embarrassment or what it was, but I would just
Probably
cry
a
so much.
compilation.
Yeah, probably all of it.
Right.
So that's what I used at first. I just would talk to my kids all the time, like, this is why, life is very short. This is why we try to live it the fullest, the best life we can all the time, we talk about memories about my mom.
Good.
Now I want to cry.
It's okay too.
Yeah, it's been really hard to deal with my grief and my children's grief.
Mhm.
Um, I guess we just talk about it. It's not like I put them in counseling or anything. I just talk to them a lot, and
You
they
keep
seem
that
to
space
be,
open.
yeah, they seem to be very understanding. They were afraid that like I would have the same thing happen to me that happened to my mom. But recently, I had a 35-day migraine amidst all this craziness, and I eventually got some MRIs done that cleared the whole brain, scare, since my mom had brain cancer and because I was having migraines most of my life. My doctor was like, "Why hasn't anyone looked at your brain yet? Your mom had cancer for 3 years and you've been having
Yeah.
migraines." And I'm like, "I don't know, but let's do it."
Right. Let's get this, check it off the list. Let's just get it done.
Yeah. So, I think that was a big relief for all of us that there wasn't
Mhm.
anything going in and on inside of my brain, but it's my neck, which is a lot, less to worry about than a brain tumor or anything else in the brain.
Right. Yeah,
So,
it's no shit. Like my son had a tumor, brain tumor
oh
in
no.
2021 in May of 20 Memorial Weekend. I'll never forget it. And he had actually it was 2020, sorry, not 2021, 2020. And it was the scariest thing because on a Saturday night he was rushed to the ER because he had been fine up to that point, and then all of a sudden he couldn't walk, talk, or see.
Oh
And
no.
then all of a sudden he's at the ER. By Tuesday morning, he's on the operating table.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah, it went extremely fast. That week he had passed out at work, and I went and picked him up, and he was working in a tree trimming place or tree trimming company. And so like he couldn't go up on the scaffolds or anything like that. He couldn't go up in a tree like that.
Yeah.
I picked him up and I just thought, oh, maybe it's just low blood sugar. So I
Hmm.
bought him some lunch and put him to bed on the sofa, and it's like, well, his dad was up visiting, and he was like, well, I'm gonna go see my dad. And I said, be careful. And so that was a Friday night. Saturday night, he was in the hospital, and they rushed him
Wow.
down to the cities. And then by Tuesday morning, he was on the operating table. So it's no joke. He's been back. He's been cleared. There's nothing,
Oh
no
good. That's
regrowth, no
really good.
anything. But that was extremely traumatizing for us. And
Oh,
that
I
was
bet.
in the middle of COVID and everything, to where they wouldn't let you see people. And I'm just very rammy, and I'm like, I'm seeing my child.
You're like
Like,
me
it's a
then.
brain tumor, of course, we'll let you in, blah, blah, blah. And so it was really
Yeah.
nice because I was very fortunate that um the hospitals had let me in to see him and stuff.
It's crazy that now I'm learning about this because like we have a commonality that the universe must have just put us together for, because I don't know a lot of people that have experiences with a loved one having a brain tumor. My mom's was inoperable, but the steps are similar, very
They
similar.
are. And his was, they said that after the fact, at his 1 year appointment, or maybe it was a 6 month appointment. I can't remember which one now. But the doctor, the main doctor that did the surgery, had said in that I think it was the 1 year, because we saw the main doctor at 1 year. And he said that it was a hairy place for him to have this tumor. They weren't sure that they were going to get it and that he would make it out alive.
Oh man.
Because of where it was right on the back, and they had to split it back, quite a bit and go in there. And there's a ton of nerves, I guess. And so they were afraid of it. They did a fantastic job.
Good. That's so good to hear.
So like he's fully healed. Well, I mean, as far as, I don't know how long it takes the brain to like move back into place after you have a tumor removed, because there's some time and stuff there. So I don't know about that, but he's 2 years out. So.
And he's doing well?
He's doing well. Has a little baby now and everything. Doing well.
Good to hear. Awesome. I love that success story.
Yeah.
Mine was very different, but man, I love to hear the success stories, because there's just a lot to deal with in life.
It turned into cancer, so we were thankful for that. But he did have the brain tumor that was a pretty good sized one that was causing water on the brain. It was sitting right on top of a lot of his nerves.
Wow.
And pinching him off and stuff. So he's extremely lucky.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And now that we're talking about this, I feel like I left out such a big part of my whole grief story, when my mom was diagnosed.
Yeah.
So, in 2019, her and I had bought a waffle truck. It was the coolest thing ever. She left her job to run this waffle truck with me. For 6 months, had excruciating head pain. And I was like, Mom, come on, we got to take you to the doctor. Like, what's happening? You have a history of migraines and now you're having pain. She told me it was so bad she wanted to cut her head off. I said, well, that's a
problem.
Yeah, we should probably go get it looked at. And she just kept refusing. And I'm like, so mad, My mom and I were best friends. Like, we were inseparable, When she wasn't with me, she'd be asked about me and vice versa. I mean, I get called her name all the time, still to this day. And I'm like, well, my mom's dead now. So it hits a little different now, guys.
Right.
Come on. But she ended up waiting even longer after that. So June, we started with the waffle truck. By January, my father-in-law was actually the one that convinced her to go to the doctor here in Valdez. Well, they did CAT scans and found she called them masses when she called me that day. I said, Mom, what are masses? Even though I know what that means, there's growths of some sort inside of her brain. But similar to your son, she was on a plane. That was like 2:00 in the afternoon. And the doctor was like, you're getting on the 4:30 plane. One of you needs to go pack her a bag and one of you needs to fly with her. And then she's going. And the panic that sets in, and I'm so mad at her for waiting this long and all these things, So we go, my husband was away at training. What in the world? I didn't even realize that until I'm talking to you about this. He leaves training and drives all the way back, picks me and the kids up, and we drive all the way up to where she got flown to.
Yeah.
To get a biopsy done. And so that was the beginning. And that was right before they announced COVID.
Okay.
So the hospital was already on code red, where you're not supposed to be in the room with children and you got to wear a mask and all this stuff. And that was before it got even crazier,
Yeah.
But that was the most heartbreaking part, was not being able to have the kids in the room with her as much as we wanted to.
Right.
And to help them through their grief was harder than dealing with my own.
It is. I know. Well, in 2016, I lost my 19-year-old stepdaughter in just a freak vehicle accident.
Oh no.
And I remember the details leading up to it, like vividly. And the main thing afterward was like, how can I help my children? It's like, I have to be strong. I can't shed my tears because I need to be there for them. But in turn, I'm showing them that they can't cry. I'm showing
Yeah.
them that they can't break down, that emotion isn't good, when in reality, that's the healthiest thing for you. That's the most natural thing for you, is to be able to cry, to release that tension and that anger and that frustration. And that the initial loss, And so when I finished telling the children that night, I went into the room and I shut the door and I just broke down. Like, I called my mom and I'm like, this is what happened. And so it was extremely, obviously traumatizing, as any loss is, but the children is what gets me. It's like, how can I help you? It's like, I
Yeah.
don't want to focus on myself. I want to focus on you, because I need to make you better. So then in some weird way, it'll turn around and help me with mine. And that's what my brain was thinking.
We put ourselves on the back burner to help them so that, yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about this podcast interview too, like, I hope that my story can help others, because we
Right.
went through a lot. My mom battled cancer for 3 years. She beat it twice. She could have lived longer,
Yeah.
probably. She defied all of the things that were written, in scientific journals about how this type of tumor is
Oh,
going
wow.
to play out. The
Yeah.
doctors were amazed, how many months she lived. They gave her a very short amount of time.
Okay.
But they call this thing strive for 5. Like, that's the max amount that you'll probably ever, and that's like if all goes well. And we feel like she could have
5 for
totally,
5?
yeah,
That
5
5
years.
months, 5 days,
5
5
years.
years? Okay, 5 years.
Yeah. But like I said, that's if all goes well, like, that's the max anyone has ever lived, I guess, under this type of tumor. And um I did it all. I worked my magic with my oils. I had her on a really good nutrition plan. We tried all of the trials that they offered her, and it all was working together. My brother had gotten some supplementation for her. We did everything for her for 3 years. We did whatever she needed, and my cousin even moved here to take care of her at one point. But it got really, really scary when we had to shave her head.
Yeah.
That was the scariest part. I feel like it made it more real. And
I
I had
could
to
see
place,
that.
yeah, I had to place these, they call them arrays. They're like sticky pads for this trial thing she was doing onto her head.
Mhm.
And I had to shave her head every other day. It was like, I want to tell that story. I want to tell it, from my perspective of a caretaker, because no one gets to hear from a caretaker's.
Then tell it right now. You have the floor.
Oh man. I guess I wasn't really prepared for that. We just, I was very bossy about it all, when she was still in the hospital up in the city. I had told my brothers would switch back and forth for a few days, and then the other one would fly up and they would switch. It was like an ongoing thing for a couple months, because she had to stay up there
Mm.
for her radiation and chemo stuff. And I got put on the back end because my husband worked like 8 weeks straight all the time, like 12,
Mhm.
10-hour days. So there was no way I could go without bringing my kids. And that's just would have been too much. But
Right.
I was like, we need to use these oils, and she needs a foot massage, and she needs, this nutrition. And it was like, I had all these plans.
Right.
And when she went through her first, set of chemo up there, and the doctors were like, this is really good. Like, a lot of people usually lose weight, but you're like putting on weight. This is the opposite of what we're normally seeing. And I think it was just like making sure she had that nutrition, because
Right.
I really believe that we can heal our bodies with the right circumstances. And that's where I
I
was with it.
agree.
Um, but she was on board for a long time. She was taking all the medications that they were giving her. She was still driving, for a while. Like, she was
Really?
taking
Oh,
her
that's
grandkids.
fascinating.
Yeah, and one day she just said, I'm done. I
Mm.
don't want to do this anymore. She got this thought in her head that the medication was making her gain too much weight, and that it wasn't working.
Mm.
And, when you have a brain situation, you're not really thinking logically. And I wanted to fight for her to stay on the meds. And
Right.
both of my brothers were like, you don't get to choose that. It's majority vote here, and we are going to let her do what she wants. And then the anger, the anger again. And you can't get any answers from the doctors. But this time when she wanted to go off of her meds, they told her that it was a very bad idea, that the rebound, the effects that were going to happen from her going off of the meds cold turkey were going to be drastic.
Oh,
And I think it was within like a week, she lost her vision. She could not see at all anymore.
really?
Yeah, it was like,
So they were super fast.
oh yeah, it was very fast. Within just a day or so after not having that medication, because it was controlling the swelling in her brain, the
Right.
steroid medication. So once she went off of that, it was like downward spiral. She fell in my kitchen a few times. When I
Mm-hmm.
would go to her house, she would be running from the bathroom trying to catch her, trying to get her balance. And
Right.
she would laugh, and I'm like, Mom, it's not funny. This is
No.
not funny. This is not. And she would just laugh. But my mom was probably trying to just cope also.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
it wasn't. I can't imagine it was an easy battle for her either. I mean, she would say things to me like, "You don't understand how exhausting this is," and I was like, "Well, I'm the one doing it for you, so I kind of do understand."
Right. But
She's
from
like,
her perspective as
"Yeah,
well, like, it would have been extremely exhausting to have this regiment to keep going, and you feel like you're running your kids in the ground because they're all doing all these things for you. I could see that, from that perspective.
I think that's part of the reason she gave up, and part of me is mad at myself for that, for even ever complaining that I had to help her. But it was all too much. I mean, we were making meals for her. My cousin and I, at one point, we were making all the meals. We were doing all the shopping and all the cleaning on top of, the chemo and the shaving her head. And it's way too much for one person. Those are
Mhm.
things that like you need like a team for.
Right. I agree
And we
with
didn't
that.
have, we only had each other, me and my cousin,
Mhm.
I got really, really mean in the whole process of this. And I know partially steroids was to blame, but I think partially the emotional part of it was another piece of, the reason, as well as the medication. Because I know steroid medication makes you a monster. so,
It does. I think that it does. Absolutely.
so she became very mean. And my cousin wanted to leave. She said, I can't do this anymore. I told her, I understand, I get it. My mom is so mean to me every day, She was just like pushing people away. And I had friends that were like, yep, that's exactly what we experienced with my brother or with my, spouse at the very end, is they just got so mean, and they weren't doing it on purpose, but it didn't change the way it affected me as a caretaker or my brothers or my cousin. We're like, we don't want to be around you. We don't want to help you if you're acting that way. But it
Right.
was it was a confusing, conflicting emotion to want the best for your mom who's struggling with brain cancer, and also have emotions yourself, like for so many years I feel like I just put myself back, way back there, to
Absolutely.
care for her. And then it just got worse and worse. After she lost her vision, she was starting to see things. Like, she would tell me the scariest shit. She would say, someone was in my bed last night. And I'm like, so scared of like the thought of like, spirits, or, things that you can see that no one else can see. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh no, that's so scary. Like, does that even make sense? I was just like trying to find the logic in it with her, but she was too far gone, mentally, because of the tumor growing in there.
Mhm.
Um, Once she went off that medication, it just started causing so much pressure in her brain. She thought multiple times that we weren't feeding her, because she would forget that she had eaten. So she'd be calling my phone constantly, and she lived around the corner from me. And I told my brothers, I was like, I can't. Like, she calls
Oh,
back to back to back to back, and I just fed her 3 meals. And one of my brothers was like, just put your phone on silent because you need to get some rest. And I was like,
mm,
but what if she needs something? He's like, it's gonna be okay. And I'm like, no, it's not. I was like panic mode.
right.
But it was an awful experience. I mean, I don't know that I would change anything except for maybe not complain as much, knowing she was in so much pain.
Right.
But the caretakers really take a hit, you know.
They do.
I
I
felt very lonely.
Yes, because your whole world is now isolated and focused in this one direction.
Exactly.
Everything else takes a back burner. The kids, the husband, the house, the job, everything
Yeah.
else, because you're trying.
Yeah.
Your
You know,
dad
and
was, go
what's
ahead.
that?
No, go
The
ahead.
fact the fact that it happened during COVID where, you know, they had lockdowns and you couldn't do this or that. And
Mhm.
that was like, I was so mad at the universe for giving her that experience in the midst of this pandemic situation that we were dealing
Right,
with, you know. It's just like, really, the time she needs people the most, they can't even go see her because they were afraid
right,
to get her sick, you
right.
know. It was awful. Um, I know that like I have a lot to deal with on that subject. And I think that I had been grieving her the entire time since her diagnosis, you know, knowing she's gonna die soon. And how do you live your life that way?
And
But
you feel
at the same
guilty.
time, reality is you don't know when anyone else around you is gonna pass either, you know.
You
But
have no clue.
yeah, I think I think that it's always gonna be hard to deal with not having her here. I don't even know how to live my life without her.
Right.
Like I said, we were always together, you know,
And do
me
you
and my
still have
husband
the
and our
waffle truck?
no, that's another part of the story that's so sad. Oh, she had the gosh, I can't even remember the name of that device, but she had the arrays on her head and it was a backpack that carried the battery thing that made the stuff work.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, if I can remember the name of it. I'm sure I can go back and look for it, but anyway, she was still working the waffle truck with me during chemo and all of that treatment. And
Wow.
I was so proud of her, you know, because she was, you know, mainly feeling well. She was still driving at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But she would take a lot of naps. And so I was like, it's okay, I'll just do it all, you know, just as long as you're here with me, because this is our thing. And
Right.
I remember the day that she was just so mean to me that day. And I had had enough. I was just silent, you know, and in the silence, she said, I think you should sell the waffle truck because I can't do this anymore. And she was so angry about it. And I was like, I just busted out in tears because I knew at that point, this is the moment she's giving up.
Right.
I thought that us running our business together was going to help her, you know, want to try longer or whatever you want to call it, fight. Um, but that was really difficult. And for a long time, initially I tried to sell it, but then when the post would expire on Facebook, I would not put it back up. I held on to that waffle truck for a very long time. But I remember when I realized it was time to let it go, you know. I think over a year had passed by before I actually sold it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just done. I didn't want to do food anymore because my mom was the cook. I was always a baker of the family. I mean, I know how to cook. My mom taught me a lot of things, but it never was like my hugest, you know, my big passion. My big passion was I was a baker. And I think that she instilled that in me because she would always be like, can you bake the cake? Because you're just so good at it, you know?
Right.
So she kind of molded me into the baker,
Right.
even though I can cook really good. So I wanted my own thing. I wanted to bake. I started during the pandemic, I started baking from home, which was like really soothing and therapeutic for me. So I just needed my
Mm-hmm.
own thing, you know. I felt like I didn't have
Right.
anything that was mine. I sold a lot of bread. And then at some point I was asked if I could sell my stuff in retail establishments.
Oh,
And I
nice.
got so fired up about that that I started looking for, you know, kitchens that would rent to me or another business I could buy, a brick and mortar. And long story short, after all my searching, I found a food trailer. So now I have my own food trailer. Um, and I recently got permitted to sell to retail establishments. So
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Things are finally happening the way that I've always wanted them to. And all of these things has taught me that life is just really too short. And if you don't do everything that you dream of, or at least the biggest ones, then
Right.
I don't want to regret it when I'm dying. If that makes any
No.
sense at all. I really
And we
do
have,
believe that your life flashes before you. I feel like all your memories like come flooding in at your last moment on, Earth. And I just don't want to have those regrets. So I'm still pushing through, even though all of these crazy things have happened around me, and I've been dealing with a lot of my own health problems.
right.
So to circle back to the question of how I'm dealing with it all, I'm just really focusing on doing what I want to do. And that seems to be the best thing that is working for me.
Right. Healthy things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
And
you already said that you stopped the drinking and stuff, which is a coping mechanism. And
exactly,
obviously drugs are a coping mechanism. But
exactly.
it's nice that you're finding you again in the midst of everything,
Yeah,
which is, I think, is beautiful in itself because I'm a mom as well, and going through it, I lost myself along the way and had to re-find myself. Um, and it didn't go back to the old me. I went to a new me because I didn't want to be the old person, the person that I was before. I shouldn't say old person, but the person that I was before. I wanted to be a different person that had, because I'm going through it and I have this new filter with which I'm viewing life. And now life to me takes on this extremely fragile meaning now. Like it's not this, okay, I'm going to live until I'm 105 and I'm going to be, this bajillionaire and I'm going to have this perfect little house and this perfect little neighborhood with this perfect little dog and this perfect little blah, blah, blah. Instead, it's, I have a blended family. I've been married twice. We have this amazing property that we're continually starting new projects on, for renovating and remodeling. And we have a yard full of vehicles for my husband to work on. Like, this is our life, and this is what we love. It's not for everyone, but it's not supposed to be. But in the midst of
exactly.
everything, with me finding who I am and what I want to do and how I want to help the world, um, was truly amazing for me to find, because I had been kind of like you, doing everything for everyone else. Like, let
Yeah,
me focus on you so I don't have to focus on myself. Or I'm the chameleon and I can blend right in with anything around me. But therefore, with me blending in, I'm not actually being, I'm just doing. And so it was very different for me to step out and say, no, this is what I want. This is the haircut that I want. I want to talk about death. I want to talk about grief. I want to talk about with losing loved ones. I want to talk about what that next stage of life looks like. I want to help people plan their own funerals so their children don't have to. I want to do these things and talk about these things because they're not being talked about. And so for me to be able to do that and step out of the norms was massive for me. Massive, but I wouldn't have done it if I had not had lost the daughter. And then, a couple years later, I lost my 4-year-old granddaughter.
oh
And so
no.
there's just so much. And it's never like, okay, this is when my grief started and this is when it'll end. It doesn't work that way. It's always compounding itself. And it's like you barely get a breath out and you're getting splashed with more water. It's like almost drowning at sea until you can figure out how to tread water. And
That's exactly how I explain it. I'm
yeah,
drowning, but
navigating
I'm
all of
treading
the
water.
waves coming in, and you're like, "Ugh,
Yeah,
can't breathe." And then eventually you're like, no, I've found a log. I'm okay. My head's above water. The waves have stopped crashing for a second. And then I can tread water for a minute. I'm good. Life is good.
exactly.
Life is okay.
Yeah, I love that. I use that analogy all the time about I'm just treading water and I'm so tired and I need something to hang on to. And um it's funny you had mentioned something that reminded me that the other thing I use to manage a lot of my
I'll just say issues,
Mhm.
is human design. Chelsea has helped me so much
Okay.
with that. And to know yourself, I think the most important like lesson I could, if anyone ever wanted to know, like how do I get through all of this, is to really get to know yourself. And it's
Yes.
the hardest part. You're never going to want to do it, but if you can get to know yourself, and like I said, I know myself very well, but I'm getting to know myself even better as I'm
Right.
going through the motions of everything. um I just started asking myself questions, like, why do you always start something and then life happens and then you stop doing it? And this time I'm like, nope, I'm gonna keep doing it, even if I'm crying while I'm rolling my bread
Right.
dough. you know
Right.
why not? Why do we have to just freeze? And I know there's a time and a place for that, where you're gonna be stuck,
Mhm.
but to get unstuck, it's very empowering.
The biggest thing I found that has helped several people that I've mentioned it to is when you get to that point that you're stuck, like you're angry and you keep going through these emotions, you're not sure how you're going to get through it. You know you have more to deal with on it, and you know you're avoiding things. You know that you know the signs, you know yourself. The biggest thing that I can tell people is to sit down and write a letter to the person that you're angry about, that you're angry with, that you're mad at. Like whether it's like my father, like when he passed away, or my daughter, or even my granddaughter, like these things, these situations, all this grief in my life, an ex-employer, whatever you're angry about, an ex-lover, doesn't matter. Sit down and write, put all of those emotions in there, all the reasons why you're pissed off at them, everything, put it all down on that paper and release it and let it go. You can burn it after that. You can bury it in the yard after that. You can whatever you want to do after that. But just get those emotions out, because they keep when they're in, I'll go back to your baking reference. They start baking and they start making all of this icky stuff, and it starts bubbling up and coming up, and it starts creating this toxic environment within you, because you're holding on to these emotions when you need to just let them go. And
I
so,
really love that. I was just talking to my friend today earlier about how I want to start writing again, because I have a lot of things I need to get out. But also, I saw this meme or post, whatever you want to call it, that said that our language is called spelling because you're literally casting spells when
yes,
you speak.
yes.
So I was like, what if we just start writing about the life we want? She's like, I love
Absolutely.
it. But I guess I want to know how. So I guess first I would need to get the anger out of the way and then talk about, the life that I want.
Right. It's that simple.
I love
Nothing is
that.
ever that simple.
No, but could it be? I just
It could
started
be.
questioning everything.
I do as well. I question everything. I'm like, why can't I do that? Why
Yeah,
can't this be just that easy? Why can't we go here and do that and be that?
yeah,
Like, why can't it? What's
exactly.
stopping it? What's stopping me from achieving that? And then it's usually me.
I was gonna say only us, because
Usually me. That's
yeah,
the thing stopping it.
I've run into a lot of roadblocks with this whole, wanting to sell to retailers. I want my food to become a family brand, something you grab out of your fridge, to
Yes.
make an easy meal, but it's home cooked, like handmade, not a bunch of preservatives in it. And the plan is not working out the way I wanted it to at all, but I'm still doing the work, because I said,
It'll
why,
work
why
out
does
how
it have,
it's supposed to.
yeah,
And
exactly. I said,
probably even better.
oh gosh, I really hope so.
It
Because
will. I believe it.
I'm
I'm
still so
speaking it
excited.
forth right now. The plan that you have for your food truck and getting your foods into the homes of people like me and all my friends and family down here and up there and everywhere in the world, it will happen better than you've ever dreamed it would.
I'm going to stick to that. I've really removed myself from the attachment of the end goal, or the
Yeah,
end,
I like that.
circumstance. Um, because that for me over time I've been so obsessed with, no, it has to be this way because this is the plan that I wrote. And if it's not, I don't know how to do it. Well, you just still do it. You just find another way to do it, and so I did. I was like, okay, well, those things aren't working. I'm still going to go deliver this tester. Yesterday I delivered some test products to a local gas station because they wanted some of my cinnamon rolls, and it'll grow from there. And I said, even if they don't want it, I'm going to sell it myself for more money.
There you go. Do it. Do it.
I love your love thing behind you.
Yes.
So my daughters are called the Loves.
Okay.
Their middle names are Love. And my food trailer is called the Love's Kitchen. So,
yeah. I love that.
I know. And I remember, so traditionally in our family, my mom asked me when I picked that as their middle name, she's like, can I just ask you why you picked that? Because everyone was like, what Hawaiian name are you going to give them? It's like a big deal in our heritage. The middle name has to be Hawaiian, and
okay.
I said, because they're going to give this world more love than they've ever imagined to ever be possible. And she's like, oh, I love that. And I said, yeah, they're the Loves. Like, that's just the thing now. And so everybody always says, oh, is it the Loves, or how are the Loves? And it's just so cool. Always a reminder. We have to have those reminders, and it's all about love. And sometimes we have to love people on the other side because they're not here anymore, but we really need to love ourselves the most, I think.
I think so. I think you're 100% right.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been great.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for being on here and sharing your tremendous story with me and everyone who's going to hear this. And all of the links that are all of the things you mentioned, the links will be below so that anyone who's listening and they want to go support you and support Cookie and support the Loves, all of the things, go buy the breads and the cinnamon rolls and everything else she's got to offer, because I'm imagining it's going to be amazing and tasty. But all of those links to be able to do all that will be below. And again, thank you so much. Do you have anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to add?
You're welcome. I just feel so honored to have, connected with you and done this interview. Just love yourself more is all I can keep thinking about as far as the advice. We forget about ourselves and our grief, and we're the ones that need to be remembered.
I agree 150 million%.
Yay!
Yay! Bye, everyone. See you in the next episode.
I read your last name, Faith Sage.
Yes. Yes. Bye, everyone. See you in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.